anybody that's even seen anything of a silent film, and you're thinking, oh, these are old movies, silent films,
so trash.
Sounds like cringy, boring stuff. It's actually a lot more entertaining than you might think.
Cinematic fantastic.
Batu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
By a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
This is the first episode. This is the kickoff. This is the inaugural. This is the one that is going to be us trying to figure out what we're doing.
The grand opening.
The grand opening. This is the one where they take the ribbon out and they get the scissors and they cut it. All right. So first...
This is our scissors.
Snip. So here's the thing. First off, my name's Jason, and this is my son, William.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Hey. So we've never podcasted before. We are really late to the game. Podcasting has been done for a long time now. It's gone up in...
Ye old ages.
Ye old ages, right. And honestly, everybody's got a podcast. So the question you might be asking yourselves is, why would you have a podcast? First off, let me start off and just explain why we would have a podcast before we talk about who we are. So, again, I'm a huge film fanatic, film fan, whatever you want to call that. I actually did go to school and get a film history and criticism degree. I've done nothing with it, so this is my way of paying off those that degree. But mostly, I got my love of film just watching a wide variety of different things. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I really like movies.
You can do so many things with movies. You can tell many different messages in an easier format because it is, visual, audio, music. You can do anything, and it's pretty cool. Like books, it's pretty difficult to do lots of things with books. Like you can't do visuals with books. You have to do like descriptions.
Yeah. Movies. Okay. Well,
they're all good in their own right.
All media is useful, I think, but film has been called truth at 24 frames a second. If you think photography, if it can hold a lot, I mean, think about 24 times that plus as many.
Think about 9,900 million
frames, right?
Frames.
All right. So the thing is, I am also in IT. I have a lot of time on my hands to think about things like that in between phone calls and helping people out with their computer issues that are pressing. With William, I haven't exposed him to a lot of the stuff that I've watched. He's seen a lot more modern stuff, would you say?
Yeah. And
this is my way of exposing him to some of that, but also having somebody to just talk with about that. Let's talk about the technical stuff that we're recording on. We're recording on one mic. So if you guys think it sounds, okay, but a little strange, that's because we've got one mic, and we're in my son's bedroom. We actually have his pet lizard. It's a bearded dragon named Nintendo, and he is about...
Pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. He is about a foot away from us, just looking at us as he sits on his rock.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, of course it is. So
he doesn't bother us.
He does not bother us at all. You just heard why we wanted to do... why I wanted to do a podcast. Well, honestly, because I got all this stuff in my head and got to try and find a way to get it out.
Because after all, I am...
The prime target.
The prime target
of my film nonsense.
Yeah, because after all, while I am the spitting image of you, kind of, I'm not to the same caliber of your 40 plus years of living.
Of course not. Well, okay. So, and I will tell you that what makes our podcast different. Why are we just how are you different at all? Well, I have ADD. I think a lot of a lot of people like me do. I have ADD. My wife says I have some elements of Asperger's that have crept in, but I've got 2 sons on the autism spectrum.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Including me.
Still cool, yeah. William has been diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD a little bit too.
Maybe.
So honestly, this is a way for him to kind of explore communication as well. You're 14 now?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
14.
Still a young man. All right, so what is this podcast about? What are we going to be talking about? Well, we're not just going to be talking about just plain old movies. We're going to be talking about mainly science fiction and fantasy films from the inception of film, period. You know, when film was actually narrative up until now. We won't just be doing science fiction and fantasy, though, because...
Of course, we don't want to be limited to, like, just only one thing. Because after all, if everyone feels like this genre of movie is... If it's really good and a lot of people will want to see that, of course, we should probably be able to look into that and maybe do it.
Well, I was thinking we would do science fiction and fantasy, you know, and I was thinking, okay, you know, that'd be the great... Okay, that's why our podcast is called Cinematic Fantastic. Because it's fantastic cinema, you know, like really good, either fantastically entertaining, even if it's, you know, cringy or whatever, fantastically entertaining or fantastically well done, but also the word fantastic has in there fantasy. So, you know, I kind of thought
limitless imagination.
I think science fiction and fantasy are 2 sides of the same coin, honestly. I mean, some people may disagree.
I believe that too.
That's what I think.
It's fantasy in a different sense.
I think it's all... Honestly, that's why people put it all under... In literature, they put it all under speculative fiction. Fiction that speculates and goes, I wonder if. And honestly, some of the best fiction out there says, what if? That's the ultimate question, is what if this happened? What if this happened differently in history?
What if there was a guy in a red suit with webs all over it, and he could swing around and save people... and deliver pizza.
You're referring to Spider-Man 2. Okay, that is...
Not specifically.
Well, he does deliver pizza in that movie. That's actually, you know, just as a hint, we will be doing that movie in the future.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. All right, so that's okay. We were going to do science fiction and fantasy, but William said something the other day, okay, that kind of brought a tear to the film nerd's eye. He said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, tell me if this is right, he said... Could we watch a really good samurai movie, like a Japanese, like old school samurai movie? And you said, is that not what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. And instantly in my head, films like Seven Samurai, Yojimbo. This is the semi-sequel to Yojimbo. Please don't let me nerd out too far. There's other ones, but Seven Samurai we'll definitely watch. Of course, strap in. That one's about 3 hours long, so we may take a break on that one. Anyway,
yeah,
we do not have what we will eventually hope to have, which is 2 mics. But we'll have to see about getting that in the future.
Yeah.
Let's not jinx that by saying we will or won't, because I don't want to jinx it by saying we were going to do it, because then it won't happen. All right. So, all right, now the criteria that we're using for these movies is going to be a little bit different than you might expect. I am trying to kind of stay within certain boundaries. Okay, so here's my criteria. I'll tell you what. PG-13 and below.
Indeed.
The reason why is because they can't. There's only so far they can go with violence. There's only violence. If it's necessary to portray a certain thing, I get it.
But violence for violence sake is really unnecessary.
Gratuitous, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
All right, so
gratuitous.
Another gratuity would be sexual situations. Sometimes they will talk about things, but not in too hyper detail. They might, somebody might throw a couple of statements out there. Actually, this is going to happen a lot more with the more modern films than the films that we're going to start out with. And you guys may think, oh, well, there's a lot of, really good rated R movies that you guys really should do. And you're probably going to mention things like The Matrix or Alien or Aliens. Okay, fine. But let's put it this way. There's a lot of really, really good stuff that we're going to do. I'm sure that we will not disappoint you. All right.
And Another reason that we're not doing R-rated movies is because not a lot of people can really watch R-rated movies. They have to be above 18 usually. Well, not all the time. Yeah. But that's what I think should be done. Yeah. Even though they're breaking it.
They usually say 17 and above cannot be allowed into theaters. But anyway.
Yeah, but it's a more accessible audience to see. Because a lot of people don't really see R-rated movies as much as PG-13 and below. So there will be much more movies that everyone else is
widely accessible.
And widely accessible.
So fathers and sons and daughters can check it out. All right. So the other thing is that another thing, and I'll talk about these rules are pretty set in stone. But I'll tell you how we'll break them, break or bend them possibly. The other thing is that the film has to have been shown theatrically. There's a couple down the pike that I don't think were shown theatrically. Maybe they were limited. They're too insane what constitutes even the plots of these movies that they just have to be talked about. And that's just going to be for my own fun. Some of the things that we're going to talk about were some of the films. I say films. They were released originally in TV episode format. And they released them theatrically by kind of putting the pilot episode or maybe the first couple episodes together and smush them together. And that was a way that some of the production companies at the time, especially during the 60s and 70s, they were able to make a little bit more money off of it. Also, the TV programs that they were showing were not shown in foreign markets. They weren't shown internationally, right? They were only shown in the U.S. where you would have a couple episodes, pilot episode of a TV show that was only broadcast in America. Then what they would do is make a movie out of it, out of a couple episodes. It's a repackaging. They'd repackage it. So that does mean it was shown theatrically. So that is a way around that. Now, the other thing is there will be some movies, like I said, that we will bend or break the rules. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, this is something that is a little bit different. You're probably expecting us just to jump right in and talk about the most well-known science fiction films ever. But we're going to start out with some lesser-known stuff that you haven't seen and stuff that I haven't seen in years, or we're only exposed to some plot descriptions and some pictures. And actually watching some of these films was very eye-opening. And I was surprised at how early on, some of these that you haven't seen yet, I was very surprised in how some of the language of film was really just even in those earliest attempts, all the things that that a lot of directors and producers and special effects artists use now, they were getting started with it and using some stuff that's some very interesting stuff. Anyway,
experimenting with what they could do, what was the best thing to do, and mark that for ages to come. Yeah. We wouldn't have anything if it weren't for that. Like, if your great-grandma wasn't born, then you weren't born.
This is true. Pioneers. You've heard some people, will listen to a band, and then some, after they've gone mainstream, and you'll have some hipster guy will come out and say, "Well, I knew them before they were big, and when they were just in their garage messing around experimentally." We're going to take a break in just a moment, and we're going to go right into talking about 2 films today. And the reason we talk about 2 films is because they're short enough that we can talk about it in the time frame and still give them their due.
Really early films that we're doing. Like, we're starting chronologically, so to speak. We're starting in the very earliest films. So, right now we are recording this in 2021. In case for those people who are living in the future, hello.
Hello. Hello, future people.
Hello, future people.
The 2 films we're going to talk about are A Trip to the Moon and Frankenstein. This is the 1910 Frankenstein. So, we're going to take a break real quick. Grab a little bit of water, get our throats unparched,
and jump into it. Because after all, we've been spending so long doing this intro.
We're just introducing ourselves.
I know.
William, they won't even know who we are. All right, but you'll get to know who we are as we go. You'll get little snippets of our life and our personality throughout, hopefully.
So continue watching.
Continue watching your phone or your computer as you listen to the audio-only adventures, William. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. welcome back. So, that must have felt like time travel. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, the first film that we're going to talk about today is A Trip to the Moon. This movie is French. It was directed by a French man named Georges Méliès.
Came out in 1902.
That's correct. Now, since this is a French film with French people making it, feel free to warn you that I'm probably going to butcher the French language. I'm not trying to mess up the way you pronounce
After all,
names.
it's not our first language or our second language or our eighth language.
Right.
So please do not sue us.
A Trip to the Moon is also called in French Le Voyage dans la Lune. Hopefully that was good enough for you. So this movie is very influential to not just science fiction film, but film in general. And it was very experimental. So a lot of the things that we look for in film, like an overarching narrative, like
Or who the people were.
Yeah, we don't. The only reason
We don't know a lot of things about this.
we do know the plot, and we do know the names of the characters in it because those things were written out, and we still have copies of those.
Film historians
Yes.
and restoration.
Oh my
people.
goodness, we would not have these films if not for them, and other reasons we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, you can, just to let you know, as an aside, a lot of movies that we're going to talk about, you can rent them or you can find them online in different places.
YouTube.
You can find A Trip to the Moon on YouTube. The copy that we watched was a colorized copy that was really high quality on HBO Max.
It was restored in 2011.
Right. And they
The
took
little shards
the
they put in
negatives, the film negatives, and things like that. So we'll talk about why they had to restore it. We'll talk about that in just a minute. All right. So first off, let's go into the most interesting part of it, which is the plot, and then we'll go into how it was made, who it was made by, the impact that it had.
This movie, A Trip to the Moon, is 16 minutes long. Imagine how long that would have felt to the little kids and stuff who are seeing this.
Or the
It was
adults. Adults
and
went
the
to this
adults
and
too.
were-
Just everyone
Well, it
seeing
wasn't
this
just-
was
yeah.
like mind blowing. How long this movie was for the tech that they had, for the time that it was, the resources they had, and the development, just everything. And it was just fantastic.
A lot of the films that, but a lot of and we'll talk about the word magic in just a minute, how that relates to this. It really does. It really, strangely enough. You know, when people say things are movie magic, this is definitely a form of movie magic. All right, so as I go through some of these plot elements, if something like stands out at you, that's something you want to mention, just go ahead and jump right in. All right. First off, I will tell you this. Anybody that's even seen anything of a silent film, and you're thinking, oh, these are old movies, silent films, you know.
So trash.
Sounds like cringy, boring stuff. It's actually a lot more entertaining than you might think, especially if you can find copies of these movies that have either a modern soundtrack kind of put in or even an old-timey soundtrack.
Or any soundtrack that they'd add in.
Say is a lot of these silent films after this movie is they had these title cards that would have
words on them.
Yeah,
so you would
dialogue,
you would know
narration. And they would explain. It's almost like watching a live action comic book in a way because
you know what they're saying, what their names are, who they like, what their personalities are.
Right, but that was a later. That was a kind of a later.
Development.
Yeah, all right.
So that wasn't present at all on this. So what we do have of the characters' names and what everything is called has been discovered from some unknown location and put onto Wikipedia.
We found the tech. Well, yeah, there it is. But film historians, they have found the text for this, so we know the characters' names. And here's what they did. Is if you were at this, picture this, you're in 1902?
1902.
You're in 1902, and you're watching either the first or second showing of A Voyage to, or sorry,
A Voyage
des la Lune, or A Trip to the Moon. What you would have seen would be a stage with a screen, and you would have had off to the side, and this is true for a lot of silent films. I know that William was talking about music being a big component. but they would have a little orchestra playing live there, very much like the musicals of old. And then, but this is different.
And they'd have a guy there as well that
you
can
would have a
narrate
narrator.
some things.
I can't remember his name, the name of what that narrator is, and so that's why we know a lot of the names of these. And if I butcher some of these names, they're pretty strange, so I'll give it a shot. All right, as the film opens,
we see a bunch of people who are sitting in a college-looking area. It's
Right.
like a university where, there's a billboard, there's desks, there's
chalkboard.
yeah, like the
chalkboard.
chalkboard, the stacked seats of where the people sit.
There are a lot of older guys, they've got these long flowing white beards. The interesting part of it is that they come in bringing telescopes, and they
Have really tall wizard hats and
Yes.
wizard clothes, and they're all sorts of colors and
they
patterns.
do look like wizards of old, alchemists of old. All right, so they come in and they've got telescopes, and they wave them in the air, and they turn into stools, and they do it using, of course, the director Georges Méliès. He uses some of the technical wizardry to do that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute.
In other
after
words,
the end.
cutting the film.
So they turn this. They sit down in the stools, and the president of the astronomy club, his name is Professor Barbenfoulis. I'll just call him.
Barbenfoulis.
Well, whatever.
I don't know.
It's close enough.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can. All right. So then what we do is he starts giving a lecture. He's talking about a project that he wants to work on. He's got the at least we know this because he's gesturing and he's pointing to the chalkboard, and he's drawing a picture of the planet Earth with a little cannon on it with dots going out from it.
After all, they couldn't explain anything because they knew it was silent, of course.
Yeah,
So
everything
they
is
had
your gestures.
they had to emote it like very carefully, and they had to
It's mime.
they had to mime it really like extravagantly in order to get their point across.
Okay,
So they couldn't, do anything. They had to do the simplest things in order to get their point across.
get the point across, right? Exactly. So
After all, you'd be like, "What on earth are these
acting-
people doing?"
it's acting at its highest form, to be honest. All right. So anyway, yeah. So I'm serious.
And mimes are also French, so maybe that's where that came from.
Well, maybe the ultimate in silent live action film is mimes. Most of the guys are the scholars there, and I would say guys because they were all men. So he's kind of giving his lecture of what he wants to do. Nobody really agrees to it except these five other guys: Nostradamus, Alcofrisbus, Omega, Micromegas,
And Paraferagaramus.
Paraferagaramus.
That is the oddest name ever.
I feel like that's a
That is a dinosaur.
That's a dinosaur name, like Parasaurolophus or something.
At least Omega, we definitely know is a Greek letter.
That's pretty easy.
See, these
to
are
pronounce.
probably Greek
That's
of some sort,
something like that,
or
Right.
just made up. Probably the
So
latter.
there's a space capsule that he's drawing, and it's in the shape of a bullet. Just as an aside, we'll talk about where he got some of the ideas for this film.
And what this was inspired by, or what inspired
What books? Yeah.
what books.
So we'll
plural.
and we'll talk about it in a little bit. All right. So they start building this capsule. Honestly, between you and me, it does not look like it could hold more than maybe two people. But
yeah, which was probably why they objected, because because like some of the people were like, I don't know, you couldn't tell. They were like, I don't think this will work. And then
I don't think
they smashed them over the
honestly,
head and
if
it's
you
like,
were-
no, this will work.
if you were to ask me, I would say it wouldn't work either, because if you think about it, they're like,
Yeah.
we're going to volunteer for you to put us inside a bullet, put us in a cannon, and shoot us to the moon.
Like, how ridiculous
no,
is that?
No thanks. Of course,
Of course they eventually agreed, because of
Well,
course plot convenience.
they do.
But that's a technique for another
Five of
video.
them agree. 5 of them agree to go.
It's another
the
video.
the bravest ones. The rest of them are like, forget it. All right.
Yeah.
So they get in there. Of course, there are there's the famous scene where they're first the capsule's built. Then there's a scene which it was a little confusing.
It's very... we don't understand it.
Well, what was the scene that was very confusing? It was the scene where
They're on the rooftops.
Yeah.
It wasn't a city, and it didn't look like a city.
kind
It
of
was
the
like a
outskirts
kind
of
of like
a
a
city.
village town kind of.
outskirts of a city.
And there was a factory in the distance, and they watch it
with a
explode.
pit. There's
and they're like,
there's
hurrah.
There's a pit going downwards.
And then there's a factory.
And they pour stuff into the pit and explode. Honestly, I think that was the fuel. or
They're
testing the gunpowder to see if it had the explosive effect. That's what I think. That sounds pretty.
I thought that it was that the factory exploded for some reason and they had to evacuate and watch it explode. But that doesn't really make sense because they want it to happen, and
it doesn't. But that's actually more interesting than
it's
my idea.
more interesting,
right? All right, so they get in the capsule, and there are normally you would have soldiers who would help it there, but in this movie, Georges Méliès has, and I looked this up. They are actually like they're in a ballet. We'll talk about them when we talk about the cast. They're in a ballet. So they are these women are guide the bullet into the cannon after the five the five guys, and not the pizza place.
Really showing legs, like
no, it's
their costume. Was. They had their legs showing and stuff.
What was it?
Really
Five Guys
shorts.
Burgers. It was okay. Sorry, it was Five Guys Burgers, right? So these five guys get in the cannon and they launch it off, and then we get an iconic scene, which it's actually the picture that we get.
Yeah, we'll talk about the cannon later because we just skipped over the cannon.
Well, no, the cannon is. We just talked about it. That's about as far as it gets.
Yeah, right. It was shot out of the cannon, just so you know. Probably made out of metal, of course, and really long.
Yes. So then it gets, and then you see the capsule hit the. Yes, I'm not kidding. The man in the moon.
It was a moon with a face.
Dude's face. Okay.
Because everything apparently had a face in this universe.
Well, the thing is, they call it the man moon because if you look at the moon, it looks kind of like a face. If you look at the dark and light spots, and people have always done that. But it's not. They're not saying that the moon actually had a face. They're using some kind of fantastical. What the term is surreal, which means dreamlike.
They're imagining a man in the moon.
This whole thing is very.
Of course, it's not real,
dreamlike.
But that is the point of film in this. It was very fantastical, and they could do you could think anything with your imagination. Like, see, I just did it now.
Wow.
It's so easy, literally.
It's the only,
especially for children.
It's the only country worth going to is the imagination. All right,
Imagination Land.
Yes, Imagination Land. All right, so they land safely on the moon. Go figure. And the astronomers get out of the capsule. They do not need spacesuits. They do not need breathing apparatus.
And what was
whatsoever.
really interesting was how they portrayed the moon's surface is very different from what we know it today, because. Today we know that it's, it has a bunch of craters in it.
Very rocky.
Very flat.
Gray
it's just
and white.
always flat the entire way around.
It's not entirely flat. It's very bumpy and
it's
craggy.
Still very bumpy and craggy, but it was just generally really flat plains all over.
Oh, you're talking about in the Apollo 18, right? The Apollo 18.
Like from what we know of the moon's surface and from what we know of the pictures that we took in nowadays, and of course it looks like it's flat anyway. So the moon's surface, in this scene, they have tall spires and mountains and stuff. They're really tall.
Yeah.
All over it. So I thought that was really interesting portrayal of what they might have thought the moon's surface was actually like.
Well, and they...
of course, in this universe,
they do get some elements wrong, of course, because no one's ever been there yet.
Yeah.
So they still have these ideas, these fantastical ideas.
It's imagination. Wouldn't come for 40, 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. 60.
Well, years?
Let's see. It was about 60. It was about 60 plus years before we actually landed on the moon after 1902. So they would have had to wait 60 years to actually see something.
For now, they had probably they had observations they made. Probably the Chinese also observed the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of different people did. Okay, so here's the thing. They look off in the distance. They see the Earth rise, which we'll tell you. We'll talk about what it looks like in the movie. All right, so they're tired, so they pull out their blankets and they lay down and they go to sleep.
They don't blow away or have moon gravity as we know it.
No, there's none of those things that we.
None of those things. It's basically Earth if it was entirely gray and mountainous.
Yeah, but it's also that's what makes this more like a fantasy. So off in the distance, you see the planet Saturn, and a little door opens up in it, and there's a man. He sticks his head out, and it's the god Saturn. And
there's comets, and the stars have faces.
Stars have faces.
There's the
goddess Phoebe. which is the
who also
moon
appears, who also has her own moon, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Because they're on the moon, and so
Right.
there's another moon that she sits on.
Yes.
And then there's two children holding a star, which of course don't have
And
faces.
they
Apparently,
don't they? They sprinkle down like
they
these
sprinkle down like
snow-
snow or dust or sand. You can't really tell. So it's snow if you think if the black and white one was true. But of course, in the colored version that we watched, of course they didn't color it, so it's probably snow, or because after all, if they
stardust.
colored it yellow, then who knows?
Okay, so then the snowfall actually wakes them up, and they go into a cavern and they find mushrooms, giant mushrooms, and they've got this is kind of a cool thing they have. They have these umbrellas that they have, and one of the guys, I think it's the main guy, he puts sticks his umbrella in the ground, and it turns into a mushroom.
Which is really crazy.
You know, it's just they're just doing whatever they can get away with experimentally, and we'll talk.
And it was also pretty cool how they could transfigure the umbrella into the mushroom. How they did.
It's stop motion.
They're showing off how cool it was, but we'll get to that in the tech. When we talk about all the techniques that
the
they use.
cinematography and the production. Okay, so now we get to we find out that the moon is not completely barren. There actually is a civilization that lives there. Now we know they are not called this in the movie, but we know this because of the book that this is based off of. They're called Selenites after Selene, which is a moon goddess. All right, so anyway, a Selenite who looks kind of insectoid, a little bit almost.
They look like
kind of skeletal.
Yeah, they have shells.
They have these little skeleton-looking
like
ribs.
They have ridges all over their body.
Yeah, and they kind of have beaks, like a bird. They're weird. Just trust me.
Really funnily, when the Selenite comes in, there's like a little goof where you can see the Selenite as the mushroom comes up. He's just waiting there for 30 seconds. All throughout the scene, you can see him waiting there.
See him off the edge. I think they
couldn't really see it. So, and plus they wouldn't want to re-render the entire scene because it would take so long to redo it that they were just like, whatever.
Right. So the when the Selenite comes in, he hits him with his umbrella, and he turns into a puff of smoke. So he just
explodes.
He just explodes, which is cool in terms of this, but doesn't make any sense. So just
if it did make sense, then it explode into chunks. But then it would be R-rated.
That is gross. All right, so,
and we can't do if it's R-rated.
So that guy turns to smoke, and then the next guys come in, and they get turned to smoke too. When they get, they're surrounding the astronomers. Sort of, I say astronauts. They are kind of astronomers, and they hit them with their umbrella, and they turn to puffs of smoke. It's like a little battle thing that happens. So eventually they get overtaken, and if it looks like I'm rushing through the plot, I'm telling you, it's only 16 minutes long.
There's not much to go off.
There's not much to go off of, but again,
there was just a lot of they were trying to show off what they could do. Whoa, goodness! It is thundering outside.
It's thundering outside. Kind of creepy. I love it. All right,
it's thundering outside.
Nice. All right, so the astronomers get taken back to the Selenite king. Okay, and the Selenite king, he might look ostentatious on his throne there, but just as easily as any other Selenite, he gets plucked by the head astronomer. He gets plucked off the chair on the throne and thrown on the ground like so much nothing, and he's turned into dust. It exploded in dust. Yeah,
because after all, you can't capture astronomers. Not even Selenites can capture astronomers. Well, so basically, if you encounter an astronomer, watch out. He's coming for you.
Yeah, exactly.
He will explode you.
You know what? I'm always afraid of astronomers because I'm afraid they're going to hit me and I'm going to explode. But honestly, that's the worst, adaptation that a creature could possibly even have is any kind of impact destroys them. Anyway, all right. So they run. For some reason, they killed the king. So I guess they're going to run back to the capsule and escape.
Yeah, because after all, they got captured.
Right. So
they're like, we got to get the heck out of here because. Goodness, me, we found aliens.
Right, so 5 of them get in the capsule, but the main guy, Barbinfulus, he cannot get in the capsule, and so he's got...
Because it's stuck and they already closed it, and so
It's
he's
stuck.
like, no.
Yes.
So what he does...
This is the logic of a dream. Okay, go ahead, tell me what he's doing.
Yeah, so he takes a rope, he attaches the rope somehow to a smooth surface, and he pulls on the rope with his body. He just throws himself at that rope, and he pulls it down a crater, which apparently is not a crater, but actually the edge of the moon. Even though it wasn't previously. When they crashed, it apparently took a big chunk off the moon.
But it drops. Gravity's a thing now. So it drops like you're dropping it from a height, and it drops into the ocean.
Without any heat at all. It did not get really hot. It did not, do anything. Because they didn't know that the outer surface would make it hot.
But not only Barbinfulus gets on the capsule, but also a selenite. So we have an alien
so he's
being makes his way to Earth.
Yeah, he is a stowaway on the ship.
Right.
And so they discover him, and they're like, hey, you know what? We're going to take this dude, and he's going to become our slave.
We're going to go into that. All right. So
yeah, we're just going to go into that.
All right. So in many copies before they found some of this footage, the story stopped
when they crashed into
the ocean and they got towed ashore. But the additional scenes that they found, I actually think cinch the plot and make it make sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you know some stuff about Georges Méliès, it makes sense. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So what happens is they come in and they have this wonderful parade. You've got trumpeters. They have a march. Everybody comes through.
Everyone's in a parade. The Marines. Ladies,
the Marine ladies,
the ladies,
they're all holding hands and dancing around a big statue of Barbinfulus. And what happens is they have the captured selenite. They have a rope around his neck, and they're making him run around, but they make him dance a little bit for the entertainment of the people. If that sounds anything like what I'm about to talk about, it's going to make sense to you in a minute. All right, so. We tried to find it. There's a little bit of text on the statue of Barbinfulus that they make, and it's Latin. It says labor omnia vincit,
which means
what does that mean?
Work
conquers
all.
Work conquers all. So basically, it's like I think it's basically
it's basically saying slavery is a good thing.
Oh, that's kind of what you got out of that. All right, so
technically slavery was still around.
Well, it definitely was.
It definitely was still around.
So here's the thing, though. This was, and we'll talk about Georges Méliès. Okay, the director was an anti-imperialist, and Britain is very imperialist.
They had, kings and queens, still do, but
yes. Okay, let me explain this for just a moment. Here's what's going to happen: is they another anti-imperialist, H.G. Wells, wrote a book From the Earth to the Moon, and Jules Verne, another Frenchman, wrote a book, A Trip to the Moon. And these two books had elements in them that Georges Méliès squashed together to make this movie. So an anti-imperialist in H.G. Wells, which we're going to see some of his works done in movies. So looking forward to that. I can think of 2 off the top of my head right now.
Yeah.
All right. So then...
And they have the title of A Trip to the Moon, and then both of the things squished together.
Yes. All right. So, and Georges Méliès was very anti-imperialist. Imperialists many times would go, okay, well, we want to find, new land to conquer for our king or queen. We've got a flag. We've got a ship. Let's go. That's one of the reasons why Columbus, discovered the West, some of the West, what we now call the West Indies, and San Salvador, El Salvador, somewhere near the Dominican Republic, but is now. Don't quote me on that. That's what I'm thinking. And they, of course, brought back people of color, slaves, indigenous people
from Africa.
Well, they weren't originally from Africa, but they were
Africa later.
Right. All right. So they would take them to the king and queen, along with all the different things that they found, trade goods and things like that, and they go, okay, look, you gave us all this money to go find, what we, to find trade routes and things like that, and look what we found. But what happened to the indigenous person that they brought back? I mean, I'm sure they were probably treated like a freak show or something like that. Like, come look at this strange person, and they, watch him dance. No, dance for me. It sounds so. So if you think about it, A Trip to the Moon looks very fantastical, but in the end, it has a little bit of a political message at the end. It doesn't beat you over the head with it, but if you pay attention, you could kind of pick some of those things up. So first off, one thing we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast was about magic. And the thing about magic is that it was done on the stage. People would misdirect you, and you would look at this particular thing, and
you'd see a man chopped in half.
Yeah, man chopped in half.
Table.
That's
floating.
One. Yeah, card tricks, all those.
Those classic things.
Those illusions. Well, the perfect person to do this film was George Méliès, because he was an illusionist himself. He loved magic tricks. In fact, he had his own theater called the Robert Houdin, and that was actually where a lot of
magic
and illusion was done.
And he was very popular in the illusionist industry because, well, he was an illusionist.
Yeah, exactly. And strangely enough, interestingly enough, he was what some people would call an auteur. We'll talk about what an auteur is as we go through these podcasts. The thing about an auteur is they're involved with every bit of the process. They direct, the directing, the producing, the writing, even the acting. And he was
he was Professor Barbenfooly.
He was Professor Barbenfooly, Sir Fooly, whatever. he was the professor. He wore the beard. But the thing is, he did a lot of things in 300, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I think he was 300 of the 520 films that George Méliès did. But sadly enough, a lot of the films of George Méliès we do have because of that we have rediscovered. The great historians and the restorers. Oh, thank God for them. But a lot of them we don't have, and this is the reason why. Is because the George Méliès later on in his career, after he's shown a lot of these things, I don't think he was very successful monetarily.
And partly because Thomas Edison.
Oh, we'll talk about that in a minute. So what happened is that's one reason why he wasn't as successful, and we'll talk about Mr. Edison in just a minute. And he's actually going to take up a little bit of part of both of. He's going to be the connecting tissue between the two films that we talk about. I'll tell you why.
Yeah, because we're gonna do that shortly.
Yes, we will.
Second film.
Now we're still talking about A Trip to the Moon. All right. So what happens is George Méliès had a breakdown, mental. He probably had a lot of stresses. He destroyed a lot of his films. And the thing is, though, we have copies. And the reason we have copies of A Trip to the Moon, this is kind of a good and a bad thing. So he gave the film to certain groups to show. And
the people really liked it because it was absolutely mind-blowing. It was amazing. The illusionary was fantastic. The things
they had never seen anything like this before.
Immaculate.
Yeah. All right, so they'd never seen anything like this before, and it was given to Thomas Edison's film company that he had, and they made copies of it without telling George Méliès. So that he
could make most of the money off of it.
Yeah, and Edison
with his own company.
Well, Edison had a habit of doing that with a lot of different things. Some people would say that he would buy up patents, and then when somebody tried to make a particular invention or something that had anything to do with that patent, he would sue the heck out of them or whatever. And a lot of these patents were not things that he invented himself. It was a lot of people that worked for him. But we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But honestly, we have so many copies of this film, or that we can, restore, because he was one of the first film pirates, or call those, movie pirates. The people that steal movies. Anyway, So, Georges Méliès, also, there was another movie that he did after this called The Impossible Voyage, which is very similar.
But of course, not really. It was still fantastical, but not as fantastical.
Pretty fantastical. Actually,
wasn't much sci-fi.
I think it was more fantastical than the previous film because they actually go to the sun, and the characters in it. I won't bore you with the details, but they basically are acting like, oh, it's really hot. It's the sun. It's the sun. It can turn you into a gas within feet of impacting
and
the
you
sun.
can't even land on it. It doesn't have a surface. It's literally a ball of gas.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the cast real quick. Now, we don't know a lot about these people. We know a little bit, so we'll talk about that. We won't go into too much detail because we don't have a lot of knowledge about them.
And after all, we are covering 2 movies. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, the other movie has a lot less actors in it. All right,
yes.
So the cast of this, of course, as I said before, Georges Méliès plays Professor Barbenfoulis, and the lady who played the Phoebe, the woman on the crescent moon, was Bleuette Bernard, and Méliès found her when she was performing as a singer in a cabaret a long time ago.
Was what? Well, what is a cabaret?
A cabaret is a French word for like a club that people would go to. You know, they would eat food. They'd watch a singer or somebody play instruments or do a dance or something like that.
Hopefully, not a strip dance.
Not a strip dance.
Yeah, it's not a strip club.
No,
course.
It's not. A cabaret was actually a little bit more upscale.
Yeah, kind of like a cafe.
Yeah, kind of. Or a jazz club. Kind of cool. All right, so. A lot of the other people in these weren't actors all the time. They were actually camera operators and people that built the sets and things like that.
Because after all, a lot of people took a bunch of different roles. Nowadays, we have directors, executive directors, and producers of all sorts and all sorts of roles, specialists. We literally have so many people that we need to be able to make movies efficiently, but they didn't have that. They were just a couple people. Well, they didn't have in the garage.
Yeah, exactly. So the people that played the Selenites were acrobats of the Folies Bergère. Sorry if I'm messing that up. And the ladies who were the canon attendants and the stars. That was the ballet of the Théâtre du Châtelet. Okay, sorry about that. Doing the best I can. So anyway, let's talk about the production real quick. Like I said, the ideas, they actually asked him in 1930 what inspired him for A Trip to the Moon, and he said it was From the Earth to the Moon and Around the Moon by Jules Verne, written in 1865 and 1870, respectively. Cinema historians have suggested that The First Men in the Moon, which came out in 1901, a French translation which was available months before he made the film, was another influence. I mean, you can pretty much tell.
A lot of influences. Very interesting.
The shooting of the projectile and all that kind of stuff. The second half, the first half was derived from Verne. The second half was derived from Wells. Okay, so a lot of the way that he designs his movies use stage things that you would ordinarily see in the stage, like cutouts, painted items. Instead of CGI and visual spectacle, you've got things sliding in that were built. So these are all theater type elements. He would intercut those with jump cuts where you would stop the camera, move
so that you can put a different object or have an object that can actually move.
Yes, as
compared to a billboard that they use in the theater, because the bullet was in the scene ropes. Where they'd fall from the bullets and the bullet falls into the sea with the rope and the selenite on it. There was a really obvious cut. Of course, they needed the cut.
Yeah.
Was used to turn that billboard cutout into an object that could fall.
Right. Also,
or a special effect.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
They didn't have CGI.
Well,
though, so it was,
no, they did not. No,
they did not. They did not.
Well, the thing is, without a lot of the things,
they didn't even have computers.
Well, no, they didn't. The things that we use nowadays to kind of cut corners with that. Nobody had back then. So what they had to do is do the best they could with what they had, and maybe that kind of encouraged a little bit more creativity.
Because after all, limitation breeds creativity.
It can. All right, so that's a good one. So
that's a great one.
Yeah, I love it. The other thing that I would mention would be there's a scene where they drop the ship into the ocean. What they did is they dropped it into an aquarium because you see these little
lizard newts.
Well, they're not. I think they're tadpoles. They're tadpoles with they're early
tadpoles.
Early frogs.
Early frogs. They still had their legs, but not but not actually being a frog. Technically,
right? Not complete, but they're very, very, very interesting looking. All right, so. So what I will tell you is a lot of the elements of it were theatrical. They've inspired a lot of films that came after.
To be in a theater sort of sense, because after all, theaters were the show before movies.
Okay, so one thing we're going to see in the movies going forward, and in the next movie we'll talk about some of the differences in turn. But a lot of the shots that we find in A Trip to the Moon are wide shots. They're all wide. There's no close-ups. There's no anything. There's no faces that they focus on. The camera is static. Static camera. The static camera helped out with the jump cut special effects that they did. You know, it helps that the camera stay still when you stop it and start it.
And after all, it was pretty heavy to move around because it was this giant thing that you crank in order to do a camera. Nowadays, we just press a button, but they had to physically crank it.
What about dissolves? They did
dissolve shots.
Dissolve shots. Those were very creative.
They overlaid.
Those are things that we take for granted now. Everybody does transitions and dissolves, but back then this was all experimental. And it was fantastical to them, and now we just take it for granted.
Yeah, now we're just like, it's a dissolve shot, a star shot.
Oh, star wipes. I hate star wipes.
General wipes, just any kind of wipe.
Well, yeah. No,
toilet wipes.
No. Okay, so the thing about the guy who would do a lot of those wipes later would be George Lucas. He didn't do any star wipes, thank God. All right, so... The music that we heard was very strange in the HBO Max version of this.
Of course, not sponsored.
Not sponsored by them. Honestly, if you like a lot of classic movies and newer movies, I'm not getting paid to say this, but it would be a good idea to get HBO Max. One reason I would say this is because they have a lot of older movies that you're not going to find in a lot of places, and a lot of the movies that we do are actually on there, and we'll tell you how to find some of these movies that we talk about. All right, so we're going to take a first off, before we take a quick break, I want to know what you thought. You've never seen anything like this before, and I've seen it once before in my life. Give me your honest opinion. I mean, just the good, bad, the ugly. What do you think? What did you think of it before we move on?
I thought it was really interesting. It was kind of confusing, of course, because there was no title cards yet. But I thought it was pretty cool. It was pretty great. I mean, it was groundbreaking, but not groundbreaking in a sense of we have 4D graphics now.
Right. No,
it was to them, but not to us. Yeah, we already have 4D graphics. But honestly,
a lot of the things that we're not going to expect them to do all the things we do now. I mean, this was just...
Yeah, this was setting up the basics.
Baby films. This was baby film
This
time.
Was setting up the basic fundamentals.
It was crawling.
Of what they needed.
This was a baby and was crawling.
Because after all, we need a baby in order to turn it into an adult.
Exactly. Think
we wouldn't even know about these things and how to do these things, and the things we have today would, of course, be completely non-existent if it weren't for this film and the other films that he made, probably previous.
Yeah.
Apparently he did a Cinderella film, but of course we're already on Trip to the Moon, so we're not going to go backwards in time.
Right. So, but we are going to, in some of the episodes coming up, and we'll announce on the website and our Twitter. We'll give you that. We'll give you what those are, those addresses for those at the end of the podcast. So, and we're going to let you know what our next episodes are going to be. I actually, some of these I've seen before. and a couple.
And some of these I've seen before.
Yeah, and a couple of these I have not. And watching them, I was. We'll talk about this when we get to that episode, but I was shocked at how a lot of the language of film that we still get now, that directors use to portray emotion, to have us focus on a particular thing, to have us feel a certain thing, it's baked in there. It's baked in there, and that's what I really liked. Is even though it was silent, I was able to understand everything that was going on, and be entranced by the story. So
this was like the first great, like, overall film, the first great sci-fi film, and it was like, it may have not been the first one, but it's the most memorable and groundbreaking. It was the first one where people definitely learned all about movies and what they were and how we're going to start.
It's very, the word I would use is
very iconic.
Jinx. All right, we're going to take a break real quick, and then after that, we're going to talk about our next film,
which is Frankenstein, the silent version.
It's 1910. It's a 1910 version of Frankenstein. It is made by the Thomas A. Edison movie production. See, I told you we were going to have a connection between the two movies.
But of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's jump right out and then jump right back in.
All right, we're going to take a quick break.
Stop.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back.
Yep.
So the second film that we watched was also very short. It was the 1910 silent horror film Frankenstein.
Very classic.
Very classic. Well, yes, it's a classic story.
Not really spooky though.
No.
Thank the Lord.
Thank the Lord. The one that ends up being classic in a lot of people's mind is the 1931 Frankenstein, done by Universal Studios, the one with Boris Karloff. We'll also eventually watch that.
But right now we're on the way earlier one.
In fact, it was. It's generally recognized by film historians as the first screen adaptation of Mary Shelley's work, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. And it was written in 1818, so quite a few years before.
It's also 1818, which is really funny because it's 18 and then another 18.
Nice.
Exact year.
Okay, so it was produced by Edison Studios. That's Thomas A. Edison. That's the light bulb guy. Also, it was directed by J. Searle Dawley. He also wrote the screenplay. It's broadly based as a scenario on the book, but it's broadly based.
There's literally nothing left. No chops.
There's
absolutely nothing but the basics. But it was really early times, so of course it's the basics. As we discussed, if we don't have the basics, then we wouldn't, like, the things we have now wouldn't even exist. This is the fundamentals.
It does have intertitles. That's text on the screen, so we do kind of know what's happening.
Intertitles were developed in the 8 years between.
Possibly so. Yeah,
of course so.
8 or 9 years. Yep.
8 or 9 years.
So let's talk about the plot, and then we'll go into the cast. We don't know a lot about the cast at all.
Yeah.
All right.
It's literally just 3-4 people. 3 or 4 people, exactly. All right, so as the film starts, we've got young Frankenstein. His name in the book is Victor, but it's not mentioned. He's just called Frankenstein. So he's discovering the mystery of life after 2 years at university. So whereas a lot of other people were discovering fraternities, he was discovering the mystery of life. So he was probably sitting he sits in his study and he looks off in the distance, and doing his secret calculations. Yeah, you don't exactly know what he's doing, but he looks like he's coming up with something. The half-life equation. The half-life equation. So anyway, he gives life to a creature. Let's put it that way. Built by using different chemicals. He pours some different chemicals into a vat. And we don't know what they are, of course. It's black and white. It's a mystery of life. It's a secret. It's a secret. It's the secret mystery of life. It's it's the chemicals that God used.
Yes. So the thing that happens in the movie is that he pours these into this little vat kind of thing and puts it in the kind of this. It kind of looks like a little vault with a little slide window, so he can watch the what's happening.
Watch Frankenstein's monster being created.
Watch Frankenstein's monster creature being created. So in the book, the monster or creature is created by sewing together the body parts of corpses, but in this, it's just this flesh or dirt and moss and
it was created
junk.
by I don't know. Honestly,
I don't know what pieced together.
They don't even show it. They couldn't even.
Well, okay.
Well, they could.
In the movie, you can tell that things are running backwards as far as the special effects concerned, because there's smoke and it's running backwards, and the pieces are bringing itself together. So they probably had a full prop, and they burned it, and the pieces burned and fell off, and so when they'd run it backwards, it looked like it forms itself. Anyway.
That is the technology part.
As it's going, I know I shouldn't have made fun of this at all, but it was kind of funny. There's to show that he's coming to life, his arm is out at an angle, and he's
waving.
He's got
like, hello.
They got a chain on it, and they're moving it back and forth, and while they're having him get pieced together, and it looks like he's waving. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, don't forget about me.
Don't forget.
Do not forget.
So he's
Don't forget.
Don't forget. Yeah. So he's getting created, and the monster comes out. Frankenstein's very excited. Then the monster comes out, and he's horrified instantly. Like, what did you expect? Yeah, you thought that he earlier in the movie he says, he says that he's going to have the most perfect creature ever, and I'm like. Okay. Do you know what you're making it out of?
They're doing a lot of assumptions about.
There's a lot of assumptions about creation.
That it was evil and that he was evil and everything.
Well, okay. In the book, he is he doesn't know English. He doesn't know a lot of things.
He's a Swiss. So he's from Switzerland.
Yes.
He's not German.
Yes. Okay. You're right. I want to mention that Victor Frankenstein is not German. He is Swiss. He's from Switzerland. Okay. So anyway, Geneva, actually. So right. So okay. In the movie, the creature comes out and he looks really creepy. He's making weird faces. So evil, creeper, maybe a creeper, but he comes out He comes out, and what does he do next? He follows. Frankenstein passes out after a really creepy scene where the creature comes through a slit in the curtain and
his bed while he's
sleeping. That is
sleeping.
kind of creepy, almost like a nightmare demon coming out of his nightmares to kill him. And then he slips back into him and disappears. And Victor wakes up and goes, "Oh, what happened?" And so he just decides to go back home. Okay. And then he goes back home, and
but the creature followed him.
The creature follows him.
He's like, "Daddy."
Yeah, Daddy.
Daddy.
Yeah. So he follows.
Daddy.
Yeah, he follows him home.
Daddy.
Okay.
Okay, that's over the top.
You're creeping your father out right now. All right. So what they do is they go. Victor is getting married. We do know that he is getting married. He writes a letter to his wife, very sweet. He says, "I'm going to come back home after I do these experiments, and we'll get married." So he does that, and what ends up happening is the creature comes to him on his wedding night to try to attack him and his bride. But I will tell you, there's an interesting thing they do in this. They actually do some close-ups, and they do some static one shots, long shots, but they do some close-ups. So at least that's something better. And they do the intertitles, so that's at least something better.
But the camera angles were still pretty static and not constantly moving
Except
around.
there was one where they used a mirror, and you could see the creature wasn't in the scene, but you could see him reflected in the mirror.
In this scene.
And it was creepy. It was kind of creepy. And
there's a mirror that they used in that scene.
And other directors have done other directors have done stuff like that now, in modern times. But it's interesting to see that kind of in there. You see kind of the birth of, we're trying some new things, because you're controlling what the audience sees with that camera. So, and the biggest difference. There's a lot of differences between the book. We could talk about them all day, every single one. But suffice it to say, the creature, spoiler alert, sees his reflection in the mirror, and disappears. Okay, he does not kill Victor's bride. He does kill her in the book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he does that in the book, but he doesn't do that in this version of the movie.
In this version of the movie, they speed it up to the point.
Yeah, but
they speed it up to the second book, The Bride of Frankenstein, in which Frankenstein's monster wants to find a bride, and so he immediately wants a bride. Therefore,
so those are,
we're skipping everything.
All right, yeah. So what William's referring to is The Bride of Frankenstein, which is a movie that came out in the 30s, and that movie, I believe, was the sequel to the first Frankenstein movie in 1931 that Universal did, where they took elements from the book and kind of spread them over two movies, so to speak. All right, so now here's the thing about this movie is the Frankenstein monster by today's standard looks kind of janky in the way he looks weird, but even then people took it really seriously, and they were saying things like, this kind of, there was even a review of the movie that said this kind of rubbish and this horror and this filth should not be put out there for you. So again, nothing has changed ever. Science fiction and horror movies or fantasy, even early stuff, people were saying that it was, should not be shown, and it was
cursed,
scandalous. People should not see it. So we don't know a lot about the people that were in it. We know that the fiancée Elizabeth was played by Mary Fuller. Charles Stanton Ogle portrayed the monster. We don't know a lot about what movies he was in, but we surely remember the picture still of him as the creature. And Augustus Phillips played Frankenstein. So a lot of it was filmed in Edison Studios in the Bronx, New York. Like I said, J. Searle Dawley is the one that directed it. He shot it in 3 days to do it. So they designed it to... They didn't even put the most horrific aspects of the book in there. They de-emphasized that. And they just kind of left it kind of mystic and psychological and left it from there. Because interesting, though, the psychological element, would you say, like when he disappears, when he's in the mirror, it's then replaced by Victor's reflection. So it's kind of like...
He was saying it in himself, and it wasn't real.
I am the monster. The monster is you. You were the monster all along.
Baba is you.
Yeah. So, the zombie is you. All right. So, they tried to remove a lot of the things that were repulsive, but again, people were, some of the reviewers were still kind of repulsed by it.
And then that was the end of the movie. They did not end it on an iceberg where Frankenstein's monster went. Nor did Frankenstein's monster learn to talk.
Exactly.
They just literally
actually that's a lot. That when we get to 1930s Frankenstein Universal movies, we are definitely going to see that he has limited talking ability. It does not. He is not as verbal as he is in the book, and actually, that's what makes the book, I think,
all the more scarier, because he's philosophizing on like everything and about life,
the nature
and about
of creation,
the nature of
God,
who he was,
the devil, fathers, sons. Honestly, there's a lot more depth to the book version of Frankenstein than the filmed version. There are some filmed versions that are a little more faithful to the book than the movies were, but we'll watch some of the ones that were more iconic and recognizable, instead of that, to be honest.
But for now, we've reached the end of the plot, and we've already talked about the production.
Not too much to say about the production, and I think the things that were most interesting is that they used the camera angles with the mirror, and they used the reverse footage to create the creature, and the makeup was weird looking. That's about all I could.
But it was pretty cool for its time. And title cards were in it, which was also something that was gonna be in all the other movies to come, was the title cards
to be honest, if you were impressed by these last 2 movies, William, I think the next 3 or 4
are gonna be even more on a scale. Because after all, these are the basic stuff.
Yeah,
and they're pretty cool.
But here's the thing. A lot of the things that we take for granted in movies nowadays, like twist endings and story within a story, which we'll talk about when we get to those episodes.
Moving camera angles.
Different camera angles. Very strange sets. Lighting, shadow,
music,
special effects, visuals. Text on the screen, intertitles. All those different things that we would use moving forward. You're going to see those a lot in the next movies that we're going to talk about. So, and we are going to announce the movies that are coming up on the website and in the Twitter. Again, now, okay, give me your honest opinions of this. It sounds like you read the book. You read the book. You've seen this.
I believe that it's indeed a adaptation, while not very faithful. It was pretty cool, I guess, for the 5 minutes it was.
That was 10 minutes, was it? No, was it 6 minutes?
It was like 5-6 minutes.
It felt short, really. It felt a lot shorter than MacLeod's movie.
It was.
All right, so with that, since they were so short, there's not a lot to talk about. That's the reason why there are some things that are good to talk about, but there's not a lot of depth that we can give it other than what we've talked about here. We put this way. We'll
be able to there will be a lot more depth in the things that we know about. A lot like, I don't know, like 1970s things would probably have a lot more depth.
Well, movies,
but we're not there yet.
Okay, well, okay. There's enough depth in the movies coming up, even though they are silent, that we can talk about them for the whole podcast rather than splitting up and talking about 2 movies. We could definitely talk about the whole movie the whole time. So, okay. So, all right. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. And if you can wait till the end of the podcast, we'll let you know what our website address is, our email, our Twitter. You can get a hold of all those things. We're even starting up a Patreon. We do encourage you to kind of donate to us, help keep us going. If you don't, that's fine. If you do, oh my goodness, you'll be our friend for life. I don't know if there's any kind of right. I don't think there's any reward tiers.
We're like you really seem very desperate.
No,
we're not that desperate, honestly, but we're doing it. I don't know.
Okay. Here's the thing. We're not desperate for money as of this point.
We're just really grateful.
We're really grateful. Now, the thing that I'd like to say about that is about the Patreon. Just real quick, I want to tell you about it. A lot of podcasts will have Patreons, and they'll give away things at the different tier levels. I do not know what we're going to offer
for right now.
So
in the future,
anything you donate, just know that you're keeping us going and allowing us to do more of these. And to get our equipment at a lot better quality, and maybe and that's what we're talking about. So anyway, have a good one and keep watching movies.
Keep on keeping on.
Keep on keeping on.
Don't forget to open your third eye and telepathically message us at cinefanpod@gmail.com. Set your chronoscope dial to the future setting and peruse cinematicfanpodcast.wordpress.com. Hunker over your ham radio as your keen ears listen for the ghostly voices tweeting on our Twitter @CinematicFanta1. Exchange all of your money into Republic credits and donate at our Patreon page at patreon.com/cinefanpodcast. Ending transmission now.